All right, this is a very um, simple workflow, despite all of the different settings here. So we can um, so we can create topography using, in this case, a surface. So we have an existing topography, and we're just we're just plugging that into an other geo, which if you've seen the basic or advanced topo workflows, you'll understand. And then we're patching in a curb, but the star of the show here is to demonstrate how the curb cutting works. So this is a an input that describes the location of a curb cut. And so if I hold Alt and I move this, meaning to creating another curb cut, I can orient that curb cut. I can determine where that curb cut goes anywhere along this curb. It updates the curb, it updates the topography, and while this functionality is very isolated, we wanted you to just understand how this simple tool works. So you can add this into any of the other work that you're doing, um, and we have a few things happening here. One is we're also adding break lines so within this edit boundary. So I can grab this and move this. The fun thing that this workflow also shows is live topo editing. So we don't ever have to refresh, but it does have more limited inputs. You could set it up to have all the inputs you want, but we just kept it simple. So there's break lines. You can do boundaries, like for the patching. And then there's the curb curves, which if you looked at so these curb curves are, they happen to be right here, but if I move them up, it's not going to change anything. The curb curves are viewed in plan, so it doesn't matter where they are elevationally, but the points that define the curbs are. So if I move this up, it'll change the curb, but the curb cut still gets cut, right? Um, so there's a number of ways and to approach this, and there's a lot of flexibility to how you could approach this. You could use a curb cut in non-traditional ways to not necessarily build a curb cut, but maybe build an entrance to a wall, for example. So if I said change the ramp distance to something higher, or change the width to something narrower, or the flare to something different as well, right? So there's a lot of cool things you can do with curb cuts, and you can see how quickly they work. Now I'm going to roll the uh, inside the guts part of this right into the same video because I feel like this is such a short one. But you know, we're ingesting from Rhino all these different kinds of geometry. So we have curb curves, curb spots, and we have our curb tolerance, which determines how close curves need to be together in order to be matched to create a curve. And then the curb spot tolerance, which is how close that the spots need to be to each curve to be associated with them. You don't want those points to be associated with both curves, so you got to make sure that you set that number right. Now, usually it's just a very small number, depending on how sloppy you're going to be about placing those points. The curb cut is a very straightforward component. We just have the center line of each curb cut. We have the curb, and then we define the width, run, and flare parameters for those curb cuts. What we get coming out are modified curbs and then ramps, which are kind of like paths, but they're not quite paths. But you're going to want to include both of those in any kind of topographic operations. So up here, we have an existing topo, which is just using this big surface. And at least in this case, but you could have your own mesh, or you could have a bunch of different surfaces or a combination of meshes and surfaces, you could define more inputs. We are defining break lines only in the proposed geoset. So we create topography from this geoset, and then we're patching in using our patch boundary, this purple curve, as well as this break line that keeps our kind of, keeps this logical. I can move this down, and that's very illogical. But um, yeah, so that creates our modification geoset essentially that's going to patch into the topography. And then finally, we have our draw topo, which we have different parameters for that, and we cut contours, and we have our different bake components using our bake name, which will replace geometry every time you click on this button. So if I click bake, now I have contours in there. And if I hit bake again, it will replace them. See how it's deselected after I bake again. So if I just undo a few steps. Then there's the ability to bake the topography. Pretty straightforward. But all of these controls are, published to the remote panel over here. And that panel can be expanded and collapsed and has all of these different parameters here. You can always expand those by, if you don't see a parameter, and usually those are the numbers, the buttons. You can even do the colors. Here you can see how you can change the color of the curb, for example. So you can make that a dark brown. Yeah. Mahogany curbs. Cool. Thank you guys. Good luck.